Welcome to the plantation. I'm your host, Master Gabriel. So it's good to be back. I've taken a little bit of a short break as I needed to deal with a few things, but nonetheless, slaves, welcome back. I am back on track and I will be posting more relevant content and also speaking about certain things that bother me as a South African. And one of these particular things were the Rand rigging case. Now, I do know that around August 2025, that case made itself back into the Constitutional Court and a judgment was reserved. And based upon some of the findings, based upon some of the facts, there was a video on YouTube where Advocate was talking, one of our prominent legal minds, was speaking at the Competition Commission presentation with regards to the Rand rigging case of South African Rand and also all the banks and financial institutions that are part of colluding and manipulating the Rand. But something took me back. Something, just something strange. Has no one ever wondered the election time, whenever we have some form of national elections, why is it always that you have all these neoliberals going on television, such as your chief economist, your junior economist, your financial investment houses, your banks, all these relevant financial professionals? Notably, they are always focused on the markets. But now, while I was sitting here and I was thinking to myself, this is high level bullshit. Why? Because what does the markets have to do with a national election? Now it comes to sense. Maybe, just maybe, the markets dictate what the political outcome is in South Africa. No one has actually thought about it in this sense. But whenever there is a national election taking place in our country, the focus is always on how would the markets react. So when a specific appointment takes place in the public service, such as the following, we have maybe a electricity minister, Minister Ramakopa. So now we also would understand this gentleman was placed into electricity portfolio and the markets have to react. The same with the president being elected and going by the National Assembly, and then also the inauguration takes place. We are always focused on what the markets are saying. So why is it that the markets determine, or the markets basically determine a specific outcome of how an election should go? This could be the same that's happening in the United States. We do know that multinational corporations, big business in the United States, especially the conglomerates in the back end, are certainly purchasing presidents. Why I say so is that the hand that pays is the hand that rules. So in the back end, yes, there may be a specific unique group of elite people that control the presidential elects in the United States. The same could be said about South Africa. Yes, we might say our president is spineless, he's a gaslighting man, gaslighting number one buffalo whatsoever. Why? Well, it depends on what you want to call this man. Well, with all due respect, he's still a head of state, even though he may be a buffalo and he loves buffalo. And sometimes we think our president is gaslighting. Yes, I would say that without fear and without favor, yes, he is a gaslighting man at times. However, with regards to the markets, why does the markets have to dictate the outcome of specific elections? And that made me realize that we are dealing with a specific problem in South Africa where private institutions collude in the outcome of political direction in the country, policy direction in the country. And it is all too apparent whenever these specific events take place in the history of South Africa, we tend to find out what are the markets going to say. And as you know, there are prominent political parties in South Africa that actually trust what the markets say. So it kind of makes me wonder how deep and how far deep is the rigging of the Rand. I came across a unique document. This is actually very interesting. I started reading through it. So I'm just going to give you an overview of what this is. This is a high-level report on the outcomes of the manipulation of the Rand hearings. Now, this was also presented by the Competition Commission in South Africa, as well as this is a presentation to the Standing Committee of Finance. This is within Parliament. Now, this is dated 24th of November 2023. I'm just going to go through some of the investigative findings, which actually are very, very interesting. Now, the role of this is a unique particular phrase inside this document. They call this cartel enforcement. Section 21 C and G of the Competition Act authorizes the Commission to investigate and prosecute contraventions of the Act during cartel conduct. As you hear there, cartel conduct. Cartel conduct is set out in Section 4 of the Competition Act and consists of the following. These include price fixing, market allocation, and collusive tendering or bid rigging. The Forex cartel involving the banks concerns price fixing and market allocation. Now, the initiation, this began on April the 1st, 2015. The commission itself, this is the Competition Commission, initiated a complaint against Barclays Africa, a subsidiary of Barclays, BNP South Africa, a subsidiary of the group BNP Paribas, Citigroup Global, a subsidiary of Citigroup, JP Morgan, JP motherfucking Morgan. Doesn't that name ring a bell? 2008 financial crisis, global financial crisis in the United States, the housing market collapses. And guess who's on the forefront participating in the collapse of the housing market, where the United States Federal Reserve had to bail out a lot of banks, and JP Morgan was one of them. The same could be said about Goldman Sachs, and guess what? JP Morgan, once again, a subsidiary from JP Morgan, and then Investec, Standard New York, Standard Chartered Bank, the initial complainant. So on the 23rd of August 2016, the Commission amended the initiation to include Absa Bank, Amalgamated Banks of Southern Africa. If those that don't know what Absa stands for, Amalgamated Banks of Southern Africa. So, Barclays Capital, Standard Bank Limited, Credit Suisse Group, Commerce Bank AG, Bank of America Merrill Lynch International, HSBC Bank, ANZ Bank, Citibank, JP Morgan. Once again, the fucking bank keeps popping up. Nomura International, Asset Manager, Macquarie Group International, and JP Morgan and Chase Bank. Once again, this fucking bank is quite dodgy, as additional respondents to the amended complainant. So the Commission's findings, based upon the manipulation of the rand rigging and what the severity of this is, the Commission found that the banks manipulated the, I'm not sure, they say here, the United States dollar and the South African rand currency pair by fixing bid offer spreads, the spot exchange rate, and the exchange rate at the fix. Further to this investigation and further to the competition's findings, the Commission found that the banks divided markets by allocating customers in terms of which one trader withholds or pulls his or her existing bid or offer from the market to allow the other trader to execute and complete his or her trade. So what this means is that on the one end, you have banks that will divide markets by allocating specific customers in terms of whereby one trader will withhold his or her bid on the rand and then automatically offer from another market to allow another trader to execute and complete his or her trade. That is colluding. So the price of the rand is based upon the outcome and the presentation from the one trader to another. So the one trader will then withdraw the bid or withhold the bid, and then the other trader will execute the bid. So in all fairness, that creates a fixing around the specific price and value of the rand, so that both parties, the one who withholds the bid and the one who executes the bid, basically both parties benefit off that unique trade. That is called price collusion or price fixing, to say the least. And this is what the Commission found with regards to how the trades are executed against the rand. This conduct also contravened Section 4 of the Competition Act 89, also of 1998, as amended. A number of global banks that pleaded to such conduct in a case brought within the United States, this is now within the USA, they've confirmed that they have actually been involved in this type of activity. The effect of the conduct is exacerbated by the fact that the volume of forex trading daily is extremely high, and the forex cartel lasted for at least 6 years. So this is technically since 2015. 6 years later, 2021, I know that South Africa's economy grew by 5% during that particular year. Now it makes sense. The extent of the rand value impacted by this cartel will be dealt with, of course, at the tribunal. So engagement with other regulators, this is only from the Commission standing point. Upon conclusion of the investigation, the Commission engaged the South African Reserve Bank, the Prudential Authority, and also the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, formerly the Financial Services Board, FSB. The regulators in the financial sector are fully briefed on the matter. It was, however, determined that in these engagements that the Commission's investigation and prosecution should take its course and further collaborate the steps that will be taken upon final determination by the Competition Tribunal. Let's read that last motherfucking part again. It was, however, determined in these engagements that the Commission's investigation and prosecution should take its course, and further collaborative steps will be taken upon a final determination by the Competition Tribunal. Now, that clearly sets the precedent for you have to be prosecuted and you are found guilty. We do understand innocent until proven guilty, but in this case, the banks have affirmed their positioning and their involvement in the rand manipulation. That line in the engagement with the regulators in this high-level report clearly states that prosecution needs to take place. Now it all makes sense as to why the South African national elections, everyone seems to want to know how the markets react. And it takes you into a different perspective. Why is that the case? These are specific things that are happening in the back end that we may not be consciously aware of, such as South Africans, but these things are happening in the back end of many governments. You've got a select few elite people with specific financial interests at play that basically determine the political outcome in a country. These go from the range of selecting presidents, selecting specific leaders, leaders going through specific levels of education, leaders focusing on certain levels of policy, and leaders focusing on certain directive outcomes that will further the benefit of these neoliberals, or in some case I do know that Donald Trump likes to call these people a shadow government. I wouldn't say it's a shadow government. These are people with specific interests and specific unique involvement in the direction of South Africa. Now we need to understand that this is happening. This is a cartel that is partaking in the specific direction the rand has to go. The same can be said for the political direction of South Africa. We need to understand that we cannot be oblivious and tell ourselves that no, we have an incompetent and we have a failing state at times, and we do understand that they make mistakes. They are human. They fuck up. Yes, the ANC does fuck up. We have to accept that. However, as citizens of this beautiful country and this amazing fucking continent as an African, we also need to take our part and play our part in making things more progressive. We cannot blame the government squarely and point a finger and always say it's government's fault, it's a government's fault, it's a government's fault. Sometimes these things are planned, these things are created, and these things are put forward in order for a specific outcome to be met. And we do have to understand that it's just not only at the government's peril, at the government's hands. There are other players, non-state actors are involved in here, as well as state actors too. And we need to be more consciously aware of the bigger scheme of things. We cannot just think okay, the government is failing in certain deliverables, and we are crying foul as citizens, and we're asking, why is this not being done? Why? We need to we need to understand that there is a bigger scheme of things, not just what we see in front of us, but what's actually at play. This is where you study consciously aware of what your actual situation is versus what the real situation is. We can understand that the involvement of the banks in the manipulation of the rand and also these financial institutions, they all take us back to the collapse in the 2007 and 2008 world economic crisis. Because if this could be done to South African rand, what would the real and true value of the rand actually be? Who knows? And yes, certain rulings have been given, certain courts have decided that certain people are off the hook, but we cannot leave that unchecked. We need to understand that the manipulation of the rand, the severity that it had on the South African economy. We also have to understand that it's not just about the manipulation of the rand. There are specific interests at play for a desired outcome. Who knows that maybe President Cyril Ramaphosa was not supposed to be, or he was supposed to be the candidate that was supposed to lead South Africa. Who knows, all of those inputs from the specific players involved made sure that CR17 gets the green light. So we have to think of it consciously as to what really went down here. Now, another section regarding to the manipulation of the rand, I did some research and I came across some very critical information. So, the Commission's appeal targets January 2024 decision by the Competition Appeal Court, which upheld appeals from 17 international banks, dismissing the case against them primarily on jurisdictional grounds. I get that. What the Competition Appeal Court is stating here, the CAC, basically they upheld appeals from the 17 international banks, dismissing the case against them primarily because of jurisdictional grounds. As we need to understand, these are international banks, and yes, the international law as well as also the jurisdiction of the Competition Appeal Court, those cases were upheld, and therefore it was purely done on the basis of their jurisdiction of where the Competition Appeal Court may be effective. So the CAC's ruling restricted the case to a handful of banks, prompting the Commission to escalate the matter even further. The core of the Commission's argument is that the CAC erred by imposing new jurisdiction hurdles, and that South African authorities should be able to prosecute, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word, extraterritorial conduct that has a direct effect on the local economy. Yes, I stand with the CAC in this particular approach. Therefore, the South African authorities should be able to prosecute extraterritorial conduct that has an effect directly on the local economy. So in summary, if you're violating any form of financial rules and regulations within South Africa and you're causing damage to the local economy, yes, you may be an international or a offshore international institution specifically focused on financial services, or you're an international bank whatsoever. Any form of those violations that has a damaging effect on South Africa's local economy, the CAC will have to prosecute you. And therefore, you cannot have a case upheld in the Competition Appeal Court only because of jurisdiction issues, because you are an international financing institution, and therefore the Competition Appeal Court has no jurisdiction over your operations in South Africa because you're an international institution. That is just complete garbage and pure bullshit. And I actually agree with the Commission's argument that the courts need to take action. So the banks in turn argue that the case lacks constitutional merit and that the Commission has failed to plead a sustainable case after numerous opportunities. Wow, how disgusting is that? Banks telling their counter-argument, stating in their counter-argument that they lack constitutional merit. Negro, please. You've damaged the South African rand. You've cost us so much money as taxpayers because we've got no cooking clue What is the actual value of the rand? Because all of these fucking players were partaking in manipulating the rand, allowing their traders to benefit, their portfolio managers to benefit, their institutional investment houses to benefit, all of the offset and manipulation of the rand. So it kind of makes me understand, how the fuck does a bank come forward and tell the court, or let alone tells the commission, that your argument lacks constitutional merit? Make that make sense, Negro. So we need to understand, this is the level of shit and this is the level of corruption going on in our private sector as well. Because as much as South Africa is a state that is riddled by corruption within the public sector, we cannot turn a blind eye that there is also corruption in the private sector too. And this case itself tells you how private business interests works alongside public interests. So we need to understand, back to that comment that I made about the shadow government, this is exactly what happens. Private interests making a specific outcome to the benefit of themselves. Because remember, the outcome is for the private interest to benefit off the manipulation of the rand. We don't give a fuck about the South African people. As long as we manipulated the rand, our investment houses benefit, our international banks benefit, our shareholders benefit, our investors benefit, and then for the rest of the South African economy, we could be paying, God, goodness knows how much for the rand. And we don't know the true value of the rand. But in all fairness, as long as we make money off this exchange and trade, that is the desired outcome. And in that particular approach, they do not actually give a fuck about South Africans. That is my honest opinion. Legal representatives for the banks have argued that the evidence presented is flimsy. Wow. While international banks maintain that South African courts lack jurisdiction as the alleged conduct occurred outside the country. How convenient. I'll repeat that again. While international banks maintain that South African courts lack jurisdiction as the alleged conduct occurred outside the country, the prolonged nature of the rand rigging allegations has also caused significant reputational harm to the institutions involved. How could that cause reputational harm? Make me understand that. Make a slave master understand that. How do they cause reputational harm to themselves when they are beating and whipping slaves, when they are separating people from fulfilling their purpose in life and being respected with dignity? How does a bank argue and say that a evidence provided is flimsy? Flimsy. You were involved in rigging the South African rand, and now you got the nerve to tell the courts of South Africa that the evidence presented by our commission and also the competition authorities involved in this rand rigging case, the evidence is flimsy. How disgusting are financial institutions. The arrogance of neoliberals. Yes, I said it. The arrogance of neo-fucking liberals. Because all these institutions that were involved in the manipulation of the rand itself, they are all neoliberal and neo-colonial financial institutions. These are all banks and investment houses. They've got a huge footprint across I wouldn't say South Africa specifically, but they have a presence across the globe. And as you know, when it comes to financial markets, there is usually either the top 5 or the top 10 that basically set the standard for the global markets. And in fact, that a bank or any financial institution that is involved in the rigging of the rand has the nerve to say that shit to our South African courts. So this is my clapback. Fuck you. Fuck your slave owners. Fuck your slave masters. You need to take accountability for the shit that you caused on our South African economy. We don't care how much legal muscle you have. We don't care how much legal advocates, attorneys, whomever is on your books that you are paying to make sure that this case doesn't get prosecuted. I will tell you this again. All those banks that are involved in manipulating the rand and causing the rand to be devalued and causing us South Africans to pay for a rand that may not be true to its value, I would say the tables are going to turn one way or the other. Lastly, the 4-day hearing, which was scheduled from the 19th of August to the 22nd of August, will determine whether the case against the 13 banks, including 3 major South African banks and 10 foreign institutions, will be revived. That's what it says here. My apologies. Some banks have previously settled with the Commission. Citibank paid 69.5 million penalty in 2017, and Standard Chartered Bank they settled for 42.7 million in 2023. Barclays, which is a former owner of Absa Bank, Amalgamated Banks of South Africa, which owns Absa, was granted immunity for cooperating. Wow. Wow. And where does that bank come from? Think again. Sambo, Volkskas. Think pre-1994. Amalgamated Banks of South Africa. They were granted immunity for cooperating. Regardless of the outcome, some analysts believe the fact that the rand ringing case is being pursued demonstrates a commitment to regulatory oversight in South Africa. Yes, we have the most robust financial markets in the world and financial sector in the world. And therefore, if you're fucking with our money and you're fucking with our rand, by all means, accountability has to take place. This case still continues. It's still currently under review as per the constitutional representation by the advocate. I will upload a video of the advocate speaking at the presentation of the case, and I will continue talking about this, trying to unpack as to what the legal implications are going to be that follows the judgment. Once a judgment is handed down, even though some of the banks have paid penalties, we still need to find out about the banks that are still involved, the prosecution, if it is going to take place, and should it be taking place, what is the final outcome. So let's move over to the other part of South Africa, what makes us great. Not too long ago, the Matlanga Commission spoke about Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. Now we must also understand there is a situation that unfolded between the late Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa as well as his suicidal situation. So firstly and foremost, I do not know the full story around late Minister Nathi Mthethwa's suicide in Paris, but his name popped up in the Matlanga Commission. So we also need to understand why this man's name popped up there. And ironically, I came across a video. This was uploaded by News Live South Africa. This was basically from the commission itself, where Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi speaks about the potential involvement of a letter being signed by an advocate, Khadebe, who made a wrong decision and therefore did not want to prosecute one of the police bosses, or should I say crime intelligence boss, Richard Mluli. So I will play the clip and just try to understand what this actually meant with regards to this, and how does late Nathi Mthethwa get linked to this particular situation. Let's have a look and listen.
I should not have said Mluli must be charged, which means she touched the wrong people in the higher echelon of maybe within the police structures or in government that did not want.
Listen to what Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi said. Khadebe touched the wrong people within the high echelons of government as well as the police structures that did not want Mluli to be prosecuted.
Mluli to be charged. And I refused to come back when we withdraw the letter. And then I received a phone call from the Minister of Police, Nathi Mthethwa, commissioners. I went to his residence in Waterkloof. And when I arrived there, the Inspector General is sitting on one side of the table, Mr. Mthethwa is sitting on the other side of the table. The minister says to me that I forced the Inspector General of Intelligence to write the letter that says, Mkhweb is wrong, this matter must go to court. She said, I forced her. Then I told her, I said, no, Minister, Advocate Khateb is an old woman. She's an advocate. How can I point a gun at her and force her to write a letter? Besides,
Yes, Lieutenant General Umkhwanazi states it clear. Advocate Khateb is an old woman. How the fuck can Lieutenant General Umkhwanazi point a gun at an advocate and force this lady to write a letter which will implicate for the proceedings of Mluli? That does make absolute sense.
when this letter was written in her office, and she actually is not the author of the letter. The author of the letter is Advocate J. Governor, who is an experienced prosecutor.
Ha! There we have it. The author of the letter is not even Advocate Khateb, it is Advocate J. Governor. Spoken straight from the horse's mouth, Lieutenant General Umkhwanazi.
Person who's working in that office. She's the one that drafted the letter. Not you, not the Inspector General of Intelligence. The minister didn't want to hear any of that. A simple say, we must stop prosecuting Mluli, we must stop disciplinary case against Mluli. Now, if we talk about political interference, that was the worst I've ever experienced. At that time, Commissioner, I can't.
Ooh, listen to that. Listen to what Lieutenant General Umkhwanazi just said. If you're talking about political interference, that was the worst, the worst, the worst. I will read this verbatim. According to News Live, this is what General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi stated. Implicated the late Minister of Police, Nathi Mthethwa, during his testimony at the Matlanga Commission. Mthethwa allegedly called Umkhwanazi to his official residence in Pretoria for a meeting with Khateb, which is Advocate Khateb, indicating they would not pursue the charges against Richard Mluli. If you talk about political interference, that was the worst I've ever experienced. Thank you. Thank you. Danko. Kyalebocha. Enkosi. Merci. Even though that's not one of our languages. But thank you to General Umkhwanazi. If it wasn't for this gentleman's public outcry and also his work ethic, we gotta give this man his flowers. And if you do believe that this gentleman will make a fine president, by all means, I will back this man.
I'm from the specialized operation. The only thing I know is to chase criminals. And I'm promoted to become the acting national commissioner, and I'm confronted with this in front of me. And I said, but this is not what I signed for when I joined the police. This can't be right. The minister can't give me these instructions. Then I said to the minister, maybe you brought me into this position and you thought you were going to use me as a pawn because perhaps of my age or whatever, but you are wrong. I'm not going to do that.
Beautiful, beautiful. So that's basically just a summary of what transpired. Also, condolences
J50 is a warrant of arrest.
Condolences to Nathi Mthethwa for his departure and also potentially his death in Paris. I do hope that justice is brought forward based upon the Matlanga Commission, and also what we need to understand with regards to the linkage between Nathi Mthethwa as well as Advocate Khateb and Richard Mluli. Last but not least, I want to bring this to your attention. There's a book I've been reading called Black Skin, White Mask by Frantz Fanon. It speaks about the proximity to whiteness. And Frantz Fanon himself was a prolific psychologist. He wrote about the inner workings of the black man wanting to be accepted into white spaces. And this is something unique that I read in the book, and this just blew my mind. I'm just going to read this insert from what his experience is. And he spoke the truth about being a black man. He actually was bunny hopping, to be honest. He was a bunny hopper himself, but I don't agree with bunny hopping, but we will have to let it be for this particular point of observation. So let's have a look and see what is being said here with regards to the black man. What is the origin of this personality change? What is the source of this new way of being? Every dialect is a way of thinking. Now, Demoret and Pichon said, and the fact that the newly returned Negro adopts a language different to that of the group into which he was born, which is evidence of a dislocation, a separation. This is according to Professor D. Westerman in the African Today, page 331, says that Negro's inferiority complex is particularly intensified amongst the most educated, who must struggle with it increasingly. Their way of doing so, he adds, is frequently naive. The wearing of European clothes, whether rags or the most up-to-date style, using European furniture and European forms of social intercourse, adorning the native language with European expressions, using bombastic phrases in speaking or writing a European language. All these contribute to a feeling of equality with the European and his achievements. That blew me the fuck away. So basically what Frans Fanon is saying that, yes, we have a inferiority complex as a black man. We always want to be in proximity to white spaces. And what do? We do all these European clothing, European languages, European branding, European approach, all of that, just to be equal to that of the Caucasian man. I would encourage everyone and anyone to read this book. It basically unpacks the psychology of a black man, especially not only him coming from West Africa and also him being in France himself and also bunny hopping at the same time. We need to understand that we don't have an issue with how we do things. We have an issue with our psychology of doing things. And this book itself is definitely something that I do recommend that all you slaves should read. I will post up the link to the book. You can download it free online. And then I would suggest that you take out the time and read and understand what the meaning is. Black skin, white mask. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And thank you for enjoying the plantation. Cheers, slaves.